First-person gameplay can oftentimes give players a more immersive experience, but in Baldur's Gate 3, looting objects, traversing the world, and combat situations have all been tailor-made for an isometric point of view. So what if your camera was always locked in first person? Would it bring a fresh new feel to this beloved world? And more importantly, can you beat Baldur's Gate 3 while locked to first-person PoV? As always, the game begins aboard the Nautiloid, only this time everything is distracting. If you're like me, you'll quickly learn that looking up is a lot more fun when the developers never intended for us to do so. In the first battle, I discovered that controlling Lae'zel from my perspective is much too janky for my tastes, that stabbing your enemies like this feels oddly satisfying, and that the imps are much more threatening when their fire is aimed directly at your face. To ensure the camera stays fixated on the only person that matters, I shoved Lae'zel to her certain doom, making this a solo run. Interestingly, normally mundane tasks like climbing up this arterial mesh, I now found to be exciting, and the brain cat trailing behind me looked much cuter than I would have ever imagined. Considering the ship looks this good from these angles, it's almost criminal that Larian never let us see it. I even gained a new appreciation for the escape sequence, when I got to witness my ally die before my very eyes. Once on the beach, I took in the lovely seaside view, then attempted to work my way up a nearby cliff. It's here that I encountered the first problem with being locked in first person. Sometimes trying to reach a higher elevation is flat out impossible. For now, this is not a major concern, as you can sneak past the illithids over here, but let's just hope this doesn't matter in any critical location later on. Executing a mind flayer on the brink of death got me to level 2, and I decided I'll swap classes every level of this playthrough to experience the full range of first-person struggles. I'd started with Rogue and multi-class now to Ranger, as these two classes don't change much between levels 1 and 12. To keep that plan viable going forward, Wither's Tomb is stop number 1. Assassinating the bandits outside felt like a medieval version of Hitman, which is something I never knew I wanted, with a clean headshot and a shove into a pit only adding to my enjoyment. Against the undead indoors, I employed my tried and tested attack followed by hiding behind the door technique, but opening the door to discover how close your enemy got can be a little unnerving. I briefly admired Jurgel's statue before setting the Bone Man free, then headed up the Mario-esque warp pipe to the surface. The Grove's Gate battle let me experience just how little our characters canonically would see while in combat, with what was going on being left largely to my imagination until I could scoot forward and snipe this goblin in the face. You may find this hard to believe, but I was not at all bored while observing this fight, like I oftentimes find myself after seeing it play out 100 times in the exact same way. Afterwards, this intricate pulley system for the door had me thoroughly intrigued for longer than I'd care to admit. Larian's ability to make ropes non-functional is truly unmatched. Somehow the Emerald Grove felt fresh, larger, and almost magical at times. Perhaps the ability to look up is something we all take for granted in our daily lives. After way too much time spent sightseeing, I left the Grove as a 3rd level barbarian excited for what was to come. A couple absolutists on the path nearby invited me to come spelunking with them. And you know, if caves looked this good in the real world, I'd probably go outside once in a while. In here, I learned owlbears have no respect for people's personal space. Thankfully, this dude had my back. Outside the cave, I took a stroll down by the river, was surprised how quickly you actually climb ladders in first person, and while searching the toll house had nostalgic feelings of a younger me exploring Skyrim for the very first time. God, I miss when Bethesda cared. The guards at Waukeen's Rest were likely confused, as I was more interested in checking out the flaming decor than helping them free Councillor Floric. The ashes on the ground had me questioning in what universe these deal 1d4 damage when being stepped on. Even in the real world, that's like a 1d2 at best. Fighting in the Blighted Village was disorienting in a way that's difficult to put into words. I'll try to describe how it feels in a metaphoric sense. From an aerial point of view, I know this battlefield like the back of my hand, but in this it's kinda like the back of your ass. For sure you've seen it, but you wouldn't be able to navigate it like a pro. This goblin in particular left me impressed and confused when it fired a shot through a window which appeared to be impossible. Unsurprisingly, I won that fight too. Under the Blighted Village, I Indiana Jones'd the Necromancy of Thay, then forgot about completing the quest while pondering about what this dinosaur hanging from the roof might have been. Somehow this was becoming the Can You Beat Baldur's Gate 3 with ADHD challenge with how distracting the first-person camera appears to be. To get back to the things that matter, the Goblin Camp was my next destination. Spilling goblin blood, the objective. Minthara was target number 1. Her 2 guards perished as they slipped off the bridge, while she stood her ground to be killed by my hand. Next, Priestess Gut was shoved to her death, but not before she called out to her allies for help. Oblivious to that fact, opening the door sparked immediate combat, with Roa Moonglow answering the call. She taught me a free lesson on how insane the darkness spell really is. I'm not sure that I'll ever complain again that the AI bugs out from this spell pretty often, because even my human brain couldn't comprehend the bullshit that was going on in my screen. I was so disoriented that I ended up fleeing the encounter like a coward. I'm not exactly proud of that, but alive at level 4, I changed my class to Wizard for a challenge with the Hobgob. Against Draw Rogzin, I called in Ogres for help, but Ogres kinda suck, and spells require a lot more effort than usual to try and find your target. I ended up kiting Draw Rogzin until I ran out of space, while praying my frost attacks would slow him long enough to seal the deal. Just as I was ready to embrace my death, he missed a lethal blow, letting my point-blank magic missile barrage save the day. The next stop on the Proxy sightseeing tour, the Underdark. A lot more drippy than you probably thought. And the mushrooms are fun too. It's crazy to think that somebody added all these severed limbs and designed this tree straight out of Avatar, and you're never really given the freedom to take in all these fine details. The Bibberbangs appeared suspiciously navigatable from this POV, although I'm sure none of you are surprised that they aren't. For a moment I was transported to a World War I war zone, and in a shocking twist, I survived. Dark vision acting like a flashlight was my saving grace against the darkness, but this jump-scaring boulette still gave me a good startle. Not feeling like playing a horror game any longer, I took the first boat out of that zone. In Grimforge you can mine for ore, then accidentally fall into lava when you're getting overconfident while exploring. You can't name any other game that's possible. I was able to outsmart Grim from up top by using illusions to reposition him and magical spells to operate the hammer. Once sufficiently crushed, I jumped down to retrieve my fat loot risk-free. The robot's defeat ended my wizard arc, and I began my 5th level warlock journey back on the surface. The mountain pass is next, but along the way this majestic red dragon caught my eye. I've never wanted to ride a creature so badly in my life. The Githyanki who saw me nearby roasted me for being easy prey.
These creatures are so simple to ensnare, Beretha.
And I dialogued my way past them to enter the mountain pass. Did you ever wonder how this lift actually works? Well, from up close, you can see that the ropes don't move, nor is the cable control wheel attached to anything whatsoever. Once again, the rope is a lie, so I guess it's all magic. Before entering the monastery, I enjoyed a little bit of nature, then experienced firsthand what it's like to be the idiot companion who triggered the trap that was just detected. Maybe we were too hard on Larian for never fixing that. It was time to start worming my way into the monastery, and while fighting the kobolds, Fireball completely changed my opinion on first-person spells. It's hard to overstate my satisfaction. I found myself getting lost in areas I've explored dozens of times in the past. Everywhere you look, you'll find something that was put in by an overworked developer who slaved over a hot GPU, even though no man would ever see this. Inside the creche, I attacked the doctor, only because her height near perfectly matched mine, and I wanted to see the life leave her eyes. Then I got a little too immersed while doing target practice, which apparently the Gith took offense to.
Vandals aren't tolerated around here.
This led to the systematic culling of the entire complex, then ended in a lengthy chase sequence to eliminate reward guys using my laser beam-like magic missiles. By the way, am I the only one who never knew these statues are holding babies? Turning them opened up the secret door, and I grabbed the Blood of Lathander just in time to begin my level 6 cleric adventures. The road to Act 2 was steeper than I remember, the undead taller, and somehow more goofy than intimidating. Upon defeating them, I continued down the path to enter the Shadow-Cursed lands. For being cursed, the region ain't as scary up close as the name would lead you to believe. I followed the Drider convoy along the path, then betrayed them to join the Harpers in battle. The cleric spells didn't quite have the same oomph that a fireball has, but they still did the job. The Harpers saved me from an unsolicited intimate moment with Spider-Man, with their plan being to steal the lantern after I did all the work, and this bought them a one-way ticket to Death City. Pixie. Near there, I got curious about how these outhouses work. Like, there's not even a hole in the ground. I guess that's what the bucket's for. Further on, I discovered an atrocious texture that somebody messed up on, and Last Lights Inn was welcoming. In the building, there was also a surprisingly accurate map of the Shadow-Cursed lands on the table. The deeper Shadow-Cursed areas appeared to be darker, which makes complete sense. Then when I approached Moonrise Towers, I accidentally clicked the wrong dialogue option to trigger combat, making this a murder all of Moonrise run, made easier by the Boots of Speed bonus action dash to endlessly outrange my enemies. For some reason, being in this perspective just forces your brain to want to run backwards while shooting at your target. Once inside the tower, all first-person immersion was shattered. The roof became a jumbled up pile of assets. However, I didn't let that distract me from the joy that is sneaking around to attack unsuspecting cultists from exciting new angles. This ogre chasing me outside gave me nightmares for a week, made worse by its death animation which should have crushed me like a pancake. Cleaning up the tower's prison, docks, and kitchen got me to level 7, and I left some of Moonrise alive to begin my life as a druid elsewhere. Wild shapes weren't exactly functional in my mods, but I didn't want to completely ignore them as they were also a little comical in their own way. Due to their dysfunctionality, I only used them a few times to keep more accurate to the challenge, choosing instead to focus on spells to fight off my enemies like the Doctor. After a walk through a spooky cemetery into Shar's domain, Spike Growth saved me against the first of Shar's ambushers. It's a lot more deadly looking up close. As the last of these undead fell, you know it's time for everyone's favorite section of the game, the Gauntlet of Shar. The soft step trial felt like this was the way it was meant to be done, as it was much easier, and dare I say enjoyable, when done this way. Self-same was same, not much to say there. And I thought the invisible maze would be a walk in the park. Somehow the worst puzzle in the game got even more frustrating for this POV. I almost considered just getting knocked to skip it, but I know that for some of you out there, my suffering is content. I tried to trace the path using a book. That didn't work, but 11 brute force failures later, I'd found success. But don't ask me how, just subscribe for more pain. Near the Barefoot Shar statue, I slew rats to complete Yerger's contract for the final Umbral gem. He's taller in person, and his furniture is pretty interesting up close. The place is absolutely revolting, and that's what makes me love it. The Umbral gems bought me first an elevator ride, then an opening to the Verge of Shadows. Once there, skydiving in the Shadowfell was a neat experience. I thought I'd sneakily throw the bones into the abyss before dealing with Balthi, but he was not having it. In response, I owlbeared all over the place. Once he'd strategically cornered himself, I shoved him away to his death, then set the Night Song free. Jaheira was already set up to assault Moonrise Towers, with the last line of defense being Sorel. Normally I'm uninterested watching these NPC allies take their turns, but this time I found myself enthralled. When the riffraff was eliminated, I met Night Song atop the keep to face off with Ketheric. This whole encounter was just a weird laser light show paladin dick measuring contest, where you're repeatedly flashbanged by smites and moonbeams to determine a winner. She slew the dog to help me reach level 8, and Ketheric got all up in my grill. Eventually a light smack to his body would cause the man to flee. Before taking pursuit, I reclassed to a monk, then entered the Mind Flayer colony. Being down here makes me glad that smell-o-vision ain't a thing. Personally, I never realized the amount of sheer death that existed in every inch of this basement until I was forced into this view. I fought a few zombies up close, then set Zevlor's gang free to help me beat up some Mind Flayers. Then in the barracks, I laughed that they have an educational, anatomically correct skeleton in a place that you can barely walk in without tripping over rotting corpses. There are just so many bones here that they may even set them up as decorations or possibly make-believe friends. Once I was done casting judgment on the evildoers' bedrooms, I took the elevator down, invisibly looked Ketheric in the eyes to assert dominance, then got caught before I could free Night Song. A smarter man would have reloaded with a mistake like that, maybe even cut it out of the video, but I decided to play it out. First focusing down the Mind Flayer, then using his own skeletons as weapons to kill everything in my way, even Ketheric in the end. Phase 2 began, and Merkel was a lot smaller than I expected. Still the best looking boss in the game though. I relied on stuns and spent way too long trying to heal Night Song and myself using a potion. That's a lot easier to do from the sky. My stuns continued to land, and together we had dropped Merkel without too much of a challenge. With Ketheric defeated, the path ahead is clear. I marched my way out of the Shadowcursed lands, right up into a Gith camp ambush. I was momentarily confused after waking up from my slumber, but still made it up into the portal. Naturally, I joined a few intellect devourers in their war against the Githyanki kind, then parkoured to parley with the Emperor. We dealt with these monks in the only way I know how, cheesily, with my Mind Flayer friend stealing the final kill. Now out of the portal and into Act 3, I tried to evade a small orphan child in desperate need of help, failed. Then first stop is the circus, to piss off a genie, be welcome to the jungle, and complete my childhood dream of punching a dinosaur in the face. Several in fact, enough to reach level 9. Then once back in Faerun, I completed my transition into a paladin. The gnomes helped me get into Worm's Crossing, I found a body under a bed, enjoyed the Sharess Caress, then walked the red carpet at Gortash's coronation ceremony. In case you wondered, still not handsome. Up here I mingled with the rich folk, even taking time to listen to a riveting conversation.
Cheese. Something cut fresh from the wheel.
If that is all, my lady.
Well, I never!
At once, my lady.
You know what's next. The game's named after it, Baldur's Gate. Fist Murphy caught my attention for the first time in my life, and he impressed me with his balance before berating me for distracting him from this important duty.
Don't distract me.
Next, it was off to disrupt a wine party in the lower city. It's a little weirder seeing 3 guys that looked the exact same up close. And shockingly, worse than that was their true doppelganger selves. The park was lovely this time of year, apart from the murderers waiting in ambush. As their blood covered the streets, I had but 2 questions on my mind. Do enemies always pose this strangely when they die? And who cleans up all the death in this city? On my way out of the park, I found what appears to be AI-generated art of Gortash. I know it's not, but Gortash is not a cute man. To continue tracking down the murderous dwarf, I went to Figaro's shop, then challenged him to a duel to the death. I hid behind the couch thinking this was an optimal strategy. They proved it was not. Thankfully, the local guards took note of the wrongdoings going on inside and popped in to give me a front row seat to this robotic domination. They even forced this doppelganger to grovel at my feet. As the battle spilled out into the streets, a brave citizen looked me right in the eyes before I took a moment to end the murderer's life. His key unlocked the tombstone shop where I got to play Ring Around the Rosie with a couple of Death Knights for a bit. I wondered if freeing Valeria before talking to the tribunal would have any special noteworthy interactions. Unfortunately, it doesn't. It just triggers an instant battle on return. If this was Act 1, I guarantee you would have at least complained about what I did before attacking. The fight in this room was quite tough, as I continuously underestimated just how far this man can run in a single turn. I abused jump and fly, which thankfully worked even though I couldn't always see where I was going. This was probably the most difficult of any encounter I faced. Once Saravok died, I picked up the amulet, having hit level 10 in the same fight. This means it's time to become a bard. The best type of bard. a stealth archer bard. I took my newfound skills to the sewers to teach a few cultists the power of Skyrim, then ran away from a spooky headless ghost, before taking on the trial of Manslaughter Chasm. I avoided being spotted while using fly to close the distance on a second sewer ghost, and during this chase, a rain of arrows poured down upon my head. However, this was not enough to save the Agent of Baal. His death opened the way forward. This statue had a much cuter voice than it deserves.
The Lord of Murder shall perish.
I walked down the path of blood into the Temple of Baal, and got ready to cleanse the sanctum of its inhabitants. Now, I can't really explain what happened here, but when I laid down a wall of fire then black holed my enemies in, Orin did nothing. As I fired more arrows, she continued to do nothing. Much like my friend Scott back when we raided Onyxia, Orin stood in the fire while doing nothing. Thinking it's because my high ground advantage had somehow bugged her out, I crept up on her. But no, I was pretty much giving her an oral examination at this point, and she just didn't care. Having killed her a dozen times in the past legitimately, I just accepted this as a gift from the gods, took her netherstone, then moved on to bigger and harder things. Since I'd been blessed with such an easy foe, I figured I'd follow it up by sneaking into Answer's prison. I failed Lance Board. I'll let you decide whether or not that was intentional, then invisibly snuck right into the dragon's resting place. As the fight started, I was momentarily confused, as I appeared to be directly inside the belly of the beast. Once I got my bearings, I was able to drag on the fight by attacking, then using the Ring of Mystic Scoundrel to go invisible thereafter. My laziness to prepare overpowered builds for every single class in the game made this quite the lengthy encounter, but in the end, stealth archery reigned supreme. Being 39 XP shy of a level up, on my way out of the keep, I broke Counselor Floric free from her prison, then decided it's time to become a wild magic sorcerer. I absolutely loved Bioshock. Random, I know. But ever since the first time I laid eyes on the Iron Throne, it gave me rapture vibes that could just never quite be satisfied from the third person. I got the dwarf to bring me there, sabotaging any potential relationship I could have had with Gortash just so I could see the world down under. And I gotta say, it was worth the trip. Screw that guy. My one regret in coming here was that I wasted time saving Gondians. Lightning Bolt was quite effective at least, what with all the straight hallways. A few sections down here were near impossible to see in, and on the way out I had to leave Zumbo Pumbo for death. Kind of a name is Zumbo Pumbo anyways. Because Gortash is understandably pissed off now, next up is the Steel Watch facility. On the way there, I figured I'd free Volo. His captors grouped up around explosives, which when triggered delivered quite the show, but not much in terms of damage. Black Hole followed by Insect Plague more than made up for that concern, with the insects reminding me of those old school PlayStation 2D graphics in a 3D world. You know, the ones where the sprite used to follow you when you spin the camera? Head on directly to the forehead, I charged into the Steel Watch facility, with the goal being to save the rest of these Gondians. They were kicking more ass than I'd ever seen in this room. Unfortunately, a little too much ass, because when the fallen enemies dropped the motivator, 2 fell at the same time. Apparently you can't grab 2 motivators in one turn on a single action, nor did the Gondians feel like helping to save their own lives. As usual, they exploded, this time all over my screen. I swear one of these days I'll save them. Originally, I thought the Foundry would be a cool exploration area, but there wasn't a lot that caught my eye, except for this lava bucket where I let the intrusive thoughts win. In my defense, that is the lateral thinking necessary to find new secrets in this game. Because the loot didn't matter, I snuck past the Steel Watch Titan, blew up the facility, sided with Wilburn, was rightfully called out for how little sense that decision was.
You're insane.
And stomped out the Gondian menace. As I fought my way through Worm's Rock Fortress, I felt a little sad my sorcerer time was already almost up. These sorcerer spells feel like they were designed for this PoV, and I'd had a better first-person magic user experience than any other RPG I'd played in the past. Before facing off against the big man, I figured I'd see how it is to be king for a day. So I stole a seat on his throne, explored his study, took a gander at how much of the city we never get to explore, then rang the bell to let Gortash know I'm here to take his life. I led my victims outdoors, with only Gortash being able to reach me. On this day, wild magic did not disappoint, when it turned the man into something finally worthy of being called cute. I laughed at his tiny claws scratching at my leg, then continuously flew away whilst blasting thunderbolts and lightning. For a moment, he became a dog, myself, a cat. I won that pet battle. After 15 minutes of torturing the man, he succumbed to an electrocution. In a rare Larian L, Gortash's corpse appeared indoors for some reason. Then for the last 500 XP to reach level 12, I roasted a few fish near the sea. The only class left for me is Fighter, so I sadly left the wild magic sorcerer days behind. It was time for the invisible sprint to the finish line. Past rats, past vats, and even brain cats. The terrain here resembled that of Swiss cheese, and soon too, hopefully, will my enemies. After failing my rolls against the brain, I followed the Emperor into the mouth of a gigantic skull. He suggested I complete my evolution into a mind flayer, and I happily obliged. obliged. Then before returning to the real world, I betrayed the Emperor. That way I never have to worry about seeing the world from anyone but my own point of view. In the city, I looked out gleefully upon the world's destruction. In the sky appeared to be one stationary nautiloid. Not sure what that's about. By now, you know the drill for this section of the game. Invisible. Not sure what was going on with my tentacles here though. That's new. If you ever find yourself in this situation, on the way through the courtyard, make sure you look your fellow mind flayers square in the eyes while sneaking by. Once through the door, I looked up expecting to see a brain. But there isn't one? That's weird. Normally I fly around this door, but you can't exactly fly around it when you can't see it. So I turned around and went the other way, luckily finding a jumpable ledge. Still making it in time to dodge the entire gauntlet. From up here, you still can't see the brain. I'm guessing maybe that's why we don't have photo mode yet. I climbed the spinal cord-like appendage, saw an angry emperor, and prepared to summon allies to complete the campaign. The game had other ideas though. It just refused to let me summon any. So you can blame either the developers, or more likely my mods, for my continued invisibility abuse. Either way, a globe of invulnerability covered me while I channeled the Triforce into the crown of Karsus. These brainy ground textures had me amused, as did the wasted effort of magic missiles and chain lightning aimed at my invulnerable ass. Once the portal opened up, I stepped in, used fly to reach the brain, then aggressively clicked the nether brain like no man has ever done before, managing to slay the brain before its third turn, thus completing Baldur's Gate 3 while locked in first-person PoV. Now while exploring Wither's bedroom, it's probably important I mention that this isn't exactly a mod. I mean it is, but it's more like 7 different mods strung together to achieve this effect. The controls are also very jank, but if people are interested in trying, I could try to share an explanation somewhere, although it's not going to be very user-friendly. Let me know in the comments. As always, I wanted to thank you for checking out my video, and give additional thanks to my channel members for their support too. Until next time, Proxy out.